Hey everyone, today I'm creating 15 cards using Kendra's Card Challenge number 11. You start with 6 pieces of pattern paper that are 6 by 6, follow the cutting guide, and then assemble the cards using all of those elements, following the sketch. Now I've chosen to use Honey Bee Studio's Spooktacular paper pad today. It is gorgeous, gorgeous colours and it's intended to be Halloween, but I have not picked any pieces that look Halloween at all. There's no pumpkins, no spiders, no cobwebs. I've just picked the black and orange colours and I have selected 6 of them. In some instances, I've used the front and the back of the same piece, just so that I could make sure that I was picking orange and black tones. This makes it super, super simple when you are cutting the pieces down to make sure all the pattern papers match on each of your card designs. Now, because this paper pack is 8.5 by 6, the first thing I will do when I cut the papers down is I will cut off the 2.5-inch strip. I basically have put that aside to use as extra cardstock or extra pattern paper, so that if I want to add an extra element to the design that is different than the sketch was intended, then I've got some spares that I know are going to match in with all of the existing papers. I have not shown you cutting all these pieces down, but I did want to show you that I line up 15 cards, 15 blank A2 white cards at the top of my desk. And as I cut these down, I just put the little pieces of pattern paper in with each number card. And then that means they're ready to go when I want to actually put the cards together and add all the extra elements such as matting layers. So here we are, everything is almost chopped down. I'm just on the last little piece here, and you can see that all the pattern papers match absolutely perfectly. And I have 6 of these 6 inches by 2.5-inch spares that'll be perfect for topping up the cards. For card number 1, I've done quite a bit of layering with black, and the black makes things stand out really, really beautifully, especially with the orange. So I'm using here my Stampin' Up! Tag maker. I saw someone use this in a video and decided I must have one, so they are discontinued, but I managed to get it secondhand off eBay, and you can see here how quickly it will create a gift tag. Absolutely perfect for using up scraps of paper. And if you're wanting to create cards like this where you have the 2 tags overlapping each other, then it makes it ridiculously quick. Way, way, way quicker than trying to use a tag die and running it through your die cutting machine. So here I am layering up the beautiful pattern paper onto the black. I used a basic happy birthday stamp onto one of the gift tags on the one on the top. I am holding very true to the sketch. You will see the picture up in the top right hand corner as well as the card number on the top left. And for this one, everything looks exactly the same as the sketch. So I really do think this is one that I'm going to use in the future. I make notes as I go through doing the Kendra's Card Challenge of which cards I love and which ones I could bulk produce. And I think this one is definitely going to be one of those. On to card number 2. For this one, it has the small little squares. And rather than try and make them perfectly aligned in the middle, what I do is get a really nice even border around the left-hand corner, and then I keep a similar border on the bottom. And as long as I'm not doing them too far apart, if I'm not quite right, then I can just trim those little edges off to make sure the border is perfect around the edge. So I hope that makes sense. I'm a little bit conservative with how I put them together, just so that it's going to be balanced when I get an end result. And again, this card, really, really, really cool card sketch. And I do think maybe the black and white of the paper that I'm using is helping with the contrast. But this is a simple, simple layout. And again, another one that I am sure that I would use, especially so that I can use up some of my card scraps. They would work absolutely perfectly with this layout. Card number 3, I also really adhere to the sketch. I have these pattern papers that are going to be cut down into banners. Now, banners are not something that I use very regularly, and I particularly don't like cutting really small little fussy ones, but these are about 1.25 inch wide, so they're super easy just to trim down with your scissors. And if you've got these little Cuttlebee scissors, it's even better because they're nice and sharp and pointed, and they'll get a really clean cut. Now for this circle layer in black, I've used this really interesting circle die, and I apologize that I have no idea where it's from. It isn't with whatever die set it came with. It's just sitting in a little container near my die cutting machine. And I decided to use it quite a few times for this project. And it adds just a bit of interest to a normal circle that would usually just be nice and simple and nice and plain. But in this instance, you'll see in a moment, it cuts all these little sections out around the circle, which just makes it, I don't know, a little bit more special. So just finishing off this one now, adding the black strip, I used a piece of black that was spare on my desk. So you can see from the sketch it's a little bit narrower. This is just me using up what I have rather than trying to do everything perfectly aligned to the sketch itself. So for the most part, this looks exactly like the sketch, but that little piece of black was something that I wanted to use up and not waste. If you're enjoying the video, it would be great if you could hit the like button. That is how YouTube knows you're enjoying the video and to spread it to more viewers. So thanks so much in advance for doing that. I appreciate it. Card number 4, I completely lost my footage. So here's the card, and I don't really have much more to add other than I do like this sketch as well. So straight on to card number 5. This one has 5 1-inch strips of paper that are cut to 4 1/4. And these are literally going to run straight across the card and have an interesting element put on top. So this, again, would be a really cool way to use up some of your scraps. I was particular about which order I put the pattern papers in. So they're not exactly how the sketch was doing the A, B, C, D, E. But for me, you know, they were all exactly the same, and putting them in whichever order made sense for the color combination was nice and easy and was just a much better way of ensuring that I had a bit of a control over the card design. Instead of doing a rectangle on the front that's quite narrow and long, I used, again, something that was on my desk, which is a piece of black scrap. And then I used a spare sentiment from my desk from a previous project. And that is card number 5. So card number 6, this is the design that I will probably not make again, and that is because of all of the banners. Now, I use, I think, 4 instead of 5 of the banners, and that's because somehow I misplaced on my desk, amongst all of the chaos of spare pieces of paper, the smallest banner. And in the end, I really don't think that it did matter. I tried to keep pretty true to the sketch with the pattern paper across the top and the 1/8 of an inch black layer. And so with these banners, they all ended up looking pretty cute. But again, I ended up with 4 instead of 5. The one thing I really enjoyed about the card sketches this time is that it doesn't tell you anywhere where to put your sentiment. So it is absolutely up to you to figure out where on the card layout you're going to actually put a sentiment, or even if you're going to include one. I know that a lot of people like to just do blank cards, so they're perfect for all occasions. I would normally put a sentiment though, so for me I thought there's a lot of white in the bottom corner here, so I'm just going to stamp a happy birthday. Now I think you can tell that I absolutely messed it up and it was a very, very bad image, and because I didn't use my MISTI, I just stamped it freehand. I then just covered it up with another sentiment and it adds some more interest and no one will know the difference. On to card number 7. This one I 100% am going to use again. I have lots of little strips of pattern paper and cardstock from when I trim down projects. And so these little 1/4 inch strips that are from when I cut down the paper per the design, layering them up next to cardstock or a piece of pattern paper looks absolutely fantastic. Now, again, I'm not sure if it's the pattern papers because I think the colors I've used today are really, really striking, or if it's the layout, but I do think this one is quite unusual and different to ones that I have used in the past, and I think it's a great way to use up some pattern papers. So I think you will see another video from me in the future where I create a load of cards using this layout and use up, maybe I'll finish off a pattern paper pad. I have quite a few sitting on my desk that are maybe 50% used, and so I could run through and finish them off by creating a card sketch like this one. So this is card number 7. So for card number 8, I did deviate quite a bit from the sketch, and the sketch intends for you to basically fold up, the corner of each rectangle so that it exposes the color on the back. Now, I think that would look really cool, but to be honest, I didn't want to fiddle around. I was just a bit lazy. I just thought, how am I going to do this? I need to score it and then fold it, and then if it's not symmetrical, it's going to bother me. So I just decided to do a simple version, and instead, I loved the colors of the pattern paper and the ones that were showing from the front. I was a bit unsure what would show through from the opposite side, and so I just went with it and decided to do a very, very simple version of the card and pop a happy birthday in the middle. So that is card number 8. Moving on to card number 9, I did fiddle around a little bit with this one to get the sizes of the pattern paper perfect. I'm not sure if I just cut things down a little strangely or if maybe the dimensions of my matting layer was not perfect. But after I put down the 2 rectangles across the top and the bottom, when I tried to fit this one in, it was too wide and it was just not going to work. So I had to fuss around a little bit and create extra panels, which was absolutely fine. It was not difficult to do, but again, I'm not sure if that was just the way I cut down my paper or if it was the way I cut my matting layer, but it was very, very easily solved. And then you can see here I chose to use a spare piece of pattern paper for the middle rather than the stark white. I originally had the white, but it just stood out so much that it looked a little bit strange on the card. So instead I swapped it for some of this black and charcoal paper. And then with the gaming controller on top, I think this would be a very popular card. So that is card number 9. And now up to card number 10. And for this one here, I am mucking around with all the little spare pieces of pattern paper on my desk because I feel uncomfortable with how much black is around the edge of that matting layer. In the end, I decided just to roll with it, but I did try and add an extra strip of pattern paper or something to make it a little bit more symmetrical. But in the end, I think it just adds a little bit more interest to the card, so I'm glad that I persisted. I thought it was worth mentioning that I have included below a link to all of the supplies that I've used today. So the main thing is the pattern paper, of course, that is the hero of the project. But there's all the glue and the scissors and everything else that I've used, just in case there's something that is of interest. I have put it down below, so it's super easy for you to find. Now, this is, again, the same happy birthday stamp. Now, this time I actually stamped it onto the cardstock before I cut everything down, which means if I do a not so great stamp impression without my MISTI and being able to do it again, I am not going to mess up my card. So I highly recommend you do that at every opportunity. Try not to do the stamping last and freehand. Look, the Versafine ink does help because it does such a great impression, but every now and then when you muck it up, it's better to not need to rescue a card and just do it properly to start with. So this one worked out beautifully, and I had this spare butterfly that I really, really like. And so that is card number 10. I want to give a big shout out to Kendra for creating these card sketches. I absolutely love creating different cards every time the new release comes out. So it's every 3 months there's a new card sketch, and if I had the time I would do it every month and use different pattern papers, but most of the time I just do it once and then I pick some of my favorite sketches and I do maybe a couple of extra projects just featuring those. I do have a couple that I am in the process of editing that were from card challenge number 10, and I will release those when I get a chance, even though number 11 is now out. But for this card sketch, you have some really cute little elements that really stack in almost like a collage effect. And I think if you had leftover cardstock or pattern paper, you could recreate something similar to this just by stacking everything up and creating, it's just some layering of some different size elements. And it just adds enough interest that even on a white piece of cardstock, enough of it is covered for the card to be kind of interesting enough. I find if there's not enough elements, I will always put a matting layer behind it. But for these card sketches this time, and I don't know if they're different in some way, but I found that I did a lot of dark matting layers and not a lot of backing panels. So I think Kendra has done a brilliant job, and thank you so much. A huge shout out. For card number 12, there's an intent to include a piece of foliage on the left. Now, I have a couple of die cuts that can create that type of design really easily, but I tend to try and use up anything that I have sitting in my little scrap pile on my desk. If I have any extra die cuts that I've coloured or anything that I've stamped, you'll often see me use the leftovers from previous projects when I'm doing this type of card challenge. You'll see that there's elements that I've used in previous videos, and I think I have about 150 videos on my channel now. So this little boat has featured in maybe about 3 videos by now, but I still had this one little one hanging around, so he is going to go to great use on this card. And I really love the impact of that big black circle, and I did that instead of using the white square per the card design. That is card number 12. For card number 13, I found that all the spacing between the little elements was a bit unusual. So in the end, I just created my own little collage with the little pieces, and I deliberately used a white piece of cardstock that was bigger than needed, because again, this meant once I spaced everything out, how I wanted it, I could then just trim around the edge and make sure that the borders were the right size. I felt like if I cut it down per the card sketch, I might end up getting a little bit stuck and not create at the size that I wanted. So in the end, I just did it this way and it worked out absolutely perfectly. I am adding a few extra elements down the bottom of the card, and I have layered up actually 3 pieces of paper, 2 that are orange pattern papers and then one with this black across the front. And the black really ties into the original card sketch. So I was trying to hold true to the sketch where I could. And with this one, it worked out really well. I have not learnt my own lesson, which is to not stamp the sentiment after you've completed the card. But in this instance, it worked out just fine. Thank goodness. On to card number 14. Now, normally when I get to card 14 and 15, I find that there's smaller elements of cardstock, but in this instance, there's actually a couple of really big pieces of pattern paper, and I think this sketch, again, is another one that I am going to use again. I love how you can use a long strip of paper down the edge and then a couple of rectangles, because I feel like if they were different sizes than intended, it would still work absolutely perfectly. I would love to know which of the card designs you think would be perfect for another project, and put it in the comments below. I'm kind of curious. I'm going to get all the way through to the end before I decide what are my favourite cards, but this one here, number 14, it's got to be up in the top 3. So I took a quick look back at the other cards, and my favourites are 2, 7, 9 and 14. So I know that that's a lot, but it was tricky this time to pick out just a few favourites because all of the card sketches seem particularly great. This one here, I really like how it just lines up the pattern papers with a border and then adds some interest to the left-hand side. I tend to do this with scraps quite a bit, where if I just put some cardstock behind and mat it, then it gives me an element that I can add to a card and then add some extra interest, and it's just a great way to not have to think too much. I also think the thing I really like about these cards this time is the 1/4 inch black. I really think that that helps it pop. And you can see here I've added some extra black down the left-hand side, and instead of white over on the right, I've added a spare piece of pattern paper. I think possibly that's another reason why I like the cards, because I've probably added a bit of extra pattern paper to them from my stash, and that's the beauty of using the Honey Bee paper pads, because they're 8.5 by 6. I've put a video here that I think you might enjoy. Have a great day.